Chris O'Connor here. Join the Curmudgeon Rock Report's invite-only curmudgeonly community at facebook.com/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist that pays honor to this episode.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. The Curmudgeon Rock Report loves BTS. No, not the Korean pop group. American indie rock stalwarts built to spill. Since the early 1990s, singer-songwriter-guitarist Doug Martsch has led various incarnations of a band that for several decades has garnered a cultish, devoted fan base with its constantly mutating, endlessly fascinating brand of inventive, alternative indie rock. Imagine the crunch of prime Neil Young and Crazy Horse with the epic grandeur of Jane's Addiction and the twisting labyrinth-like song structures of Pavement. Add in extended noise guitar passages a la Sonic Youth with improvisational freak-out jams a la The Grateful Dead. Finally, throw in Marsh's wonderful lyrics of wistful yearning, stargazing, philosophizing, and quirky social commentary, and, in recent years, ventures into Turkish psychedelia, Brazilian samba pop, and Jamaican reggae, and you have an idea of what this brilliant band is about. In this podcast's Parallel Universe segment, we review albums by bands or artists who would be loved and revered on a mass level in a parallel universe where rock music is still a mainstream musical genre and part of the pop cultural zeitgeist. Well, consider Built to Spill the charter member of this little universe Chris and I have created. We love Doug Martsch's music with all our hearts, and in our version of the 1990s, Built to Spill would have taken the place of the likes of Korn or Creed in rock radio. So, join us as we begin a new ongoing series where we put the spotlight on the discographies of bands/artists that we think you and everyone else should be into and have your lives enriched by. Welcome to Parallel Universe All-Stars present Built to Spill, and welcome to the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
Gotta say, Arturo, it feels great after 2 months of swimming in like Winger and Slaughter and Skid Row and Limp Bizkit. It felt great to spend my week listening to good music. And in most cases, great to amazing music, as we'll get into, Built to Spill, one of our favorite bands. What a relief, man. I leave a lot of the creative programming to you, but you've been beating the crap out of me. It's like, let's do all A, but you get all the bad music.
Well, you speak so well about the bad shit.
Yeah, I was going to say, I articulate. I'm a good apologist for Motley Crue. Unfortunately, Motley Crue is a good band, but the rest of that stuff that was painful. At least I got to listen to Appetite for Destruction. That was like the one silver lining of that whole experience. So, Anyway, how you doing, man?
Good. Ready to before we get into the charter member of our parallel universe. I will mention why later in the episode. Before we talk about the original member of the parallel universe, I hear something, and that is
the actual parallel universe.
The universe that we created. Yes.
Yeah, we're taking our travels over to the other side of the space-time continuum, where blue is gray and gray is blue, and green is white, and white is green, and tall is short, and short is tall, and everything is wonderful in the world because rock and roll is still predominant, man. It's still the thing. It's on the billboards. It's on the patches on the jean jackets. It's what you light your lighters to at the arena. There actually are arena shows that for artists other than Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo, and it's a great time had by all, and we're rocking like docking, baby. And that's a conceptual way of saying this is the section of the show where we talk about new and newish music from artists that we think that you would dig and that we think that you should invest time in and we're digging and we want to share with you. The rock geek iconoclasts that are looking to stay current by listening to this podcast. So, Arturo, what new music are you concentrating on this episode's version of the Parallel Universe?
Yes, it is the single, the latest single by Snapped Ankles called Pay the Rent. The London art rock band Snapped Ankles have been around for almost a decade with their exhilarating first two albums, 2017's Come Play the Trees and 2019's Stunning Luxury. They seem to find the middle point between the new wave art pop of Devo and the politicized electro punk of Kathleen Hanna's Le Tigre. With their third album, 2021's Forest of Your Problems, one got the impression that Snapped Ankles had reached a dead end with their sound, recycling the same kind of grooves but without the catchy songs. I guess it took the band, originally a drum-bass synthesizer trio but now a quartet, 4 years to re-energize themselves because their latest album, Hard Times, Furious Dancing, is not a great album, but rather a transitional album into a new sound, at least for them, that portends an interesting future for them. The album finds Snapped Ankles delving more into EDM styles like techno and house music like never before, and the standout single from the album, Pay the Rent, is the most exemplary track, riding a dynamite bass groove and a staccato synth pulse straight out of techno duo Orbital, circa the 1990s. The song builds and feasts on the tension rather than seeks to release it. Lyrically, the Ankles comment on crippling socioeconomic disparity, focusing on the rising cost of living in the face of stagnant wages, a problem the whole world is facing now and has been arguably for the past 30 years or more. Where's the Kaganer is another kick-ass track, this time one that goes into full-on techno, while Smart World gives you more of that old-school Snapped Ankles sound, if that's what you're looking for. Hopefully these tracks lead the way to a truly great Snapped Ankles album, which is what longtime fans of this band, like myself, have been craving for a while. Chris?
Yeah, the good stuff on this record, like Pay the Rent, the song that you're concentrating on, is really like a mashup of like Kraftwerk, Gang of Four, The Fall, Chemical Brothers, and Goat.
Yeah.
It's just really eclectic, really kind of groovy, weird mix. Like you have really interesting synth loops going on, and you have things skitter along compellingly. And I love the name of this album, by the way, Hard Times, Furious Dancing. Yeah, that's one of my favorite album names of recent vintage. So, yeah, this band's got a lot of potential in terms of the direction they're headed. Like you said, their next album might be interesting because they seem to be like making that transition from art rock to techno rock.
Yeah.
And I want to see much farther they can take the techno rock. So, yeah, that's a good call, and we'll be interested to see what happens there. But in the meantime, yeah, definitely check out Pay the Rent. It's on all the streaming services, and it's up there now, and it's a booty shaker for sure. Speaking of booty shakers, there's a few of those on the record that I'm covering, which is the latest album by the rapper Little Simz, who we've covered on this podcast before. She's got a new album out called Lotus that I really like, and I think is probably the best work that she's done in since this podcast has been on the air, dating back 4.5 years. We've covered a couple of her releases in the life of this podcast. So let's get into Lotus by Little Simz. Little Simz is an Anglo-Nigerian rapper. That means she's from English. She's from England, and she's the child of Nigerian parents. We've covered her a few times on the Parallel Universe. Before now, she's been a quirky maximalist, serving up verbose abstract verses and spoken word interludes against funk and Afrobeat inspired beats by British super producer Inflow. This has produced strong results, including 2021's Mercury Prize winning album Sometimes I Might Be Introvert and an electric dance music inflected EP last year called Drop 7, which I covered here again on the Parallel Universe last year. But over the past year, Little Simz has endured a big change, naming a falling out over money with Inflow and a subsequent legal battle. The falling out left her without her closest creative collaborator and a lot of hurt feelings. The hurt feelings and bitterness make their way onto Little Simz' latest album, The Terrific Lotus, an examination of pain, betrayal, and redemption that finds Simz at her most focused. Gone are the spoken word soliloquies that kept her previous records from being more masterful. Gone too are Inflow's nouveau funk beats. In their place are the stylings of new producer Miles Clinton James, who proves to be a more diverse and challenging contributor. James takes the music more into jazz and pop R&B and even folk rock, as on Lotus's title track, a duet with indie darling Michael Kiwanuka. What results is a tight, thematically strong set of 13 fully realized songs. Highlights include the single Flood, a bass-thumping bopper featuring a fun yapping chorus vocal from South African rapper Moonchild Sinelli, the quirky funk of Young, Simz' ode to drinking and having a good time, the jazzy guitar and string-laden Free, the moody minimalist bitter monologia of Hollow, a nasty slough-off that likely targets Inflow, and the disco-inspired chimes and slap bass groove of Enough. The new diversity in the music serves Little Simz well and makes for an excellent backdrop to her musings, whether guttural or philosophical. Lotus is the best of the Little Simz records that we've covered on this podcast in its 110 episode history. It's grown on me more with each listen, and I suspect will continue to keep growing in power and groove. Simz and Miles Clinton James make a great team, and here's hoping that they continue to work together in the future. Art, what say you about this record?
Yeah, throughout the lifetime of this podcast, there have been artists and bands that I've covered in the Parallel Universe segment that have made you, Chris, wonder, what the hell do you see or hear in them? Well, if you reverse our roles, for me, one of those artists is Little Simz. By no means do I think she sucks. When she lets loose and decides to not bore us with her spoken word diary journal bullshit, she actually has produced a few banging tracks. Most of them off her pretty decent but resoundingly overrated, at least by critics, album from 2021, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. And therein lies my general problem with Little Simz. She's just not a good rapper. She either speaks really fast without any kind of flow, or she does that spoken word diary journal vomit. On this album, she finally shows that she can rap when she wants to or when it's pushed out of her or drawn from her. The track Lion is one of 3 tracks where Little Simz is actually writing the beat in rhythm to the beat.
Yeah,
Not
that's true.
surprisingly, it's a superb beat as well. In fact, it's probably the best hip hop track I've heard all year. Other great funky ass tracks where Little Simz is also actually rapping include the single Free and a track that you mentioned, Enough. Unfortunately, there aren't enough songs like this on the album. Musically, there's too much moody, mellow, ethereal, quasi-jazzy, sad sack soup throughout the record. As for Simz herself, she just doesn't rap enough or well enough to counteract her tendency to wallow in corny spoken word self-absorption. She's achieved some commercial success and a good amount of critical acclaim in her native UK, but very little to none outside of her native country. And
Right.
the vast majority of her critical acclaim has come from middle-aged white guys who nominally review indie rock, like us.
Yeah, seriously. I fit the demographic, motherfucker.
Yeah. That being said, a 4 out of 5-star review in the NME from Kian Cyan Williams betrays what the reviewer really feels. Quote, Lotus isn't always an easy listen, and sometimes the truths in its bars feel more like diary entries than rap lyrics, but maybe that's its purpose. Across 13 tracks, Simz sifts through grief, pressure, burnout, and spiritual reckoning with a vulnerability that is admirable, making it among her most important works emotionally rather than sonically. Talk about damning with faint praise.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not much of a four-star review. Chris here again. We usually end our episodes by inviting you to join our Curmudgeonly community page on Facebook. Well, we're picking up our efforts there. Know people just as passionate as us about rock and roll? Invite them to join in the fun. You don't actually need our permission to do so. Also, expect to see a lot more content up there moving forward. Our mission is to engage you, so darn it, we'll engage you like a fire hose, or maybe like a firehouse if we're going to give love to Gene Simmons. We may also be making a few offers. Want to wear a t-shirt featuring our logo? You may have that opportunity soon. So be a fellow curmudgeon, help us expand our little community, and share your own musings via your own posts. We're at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock. Doug Martsch is one of the most talented rock musicians of the past 40 years. He's also one of the most unassuming. Interviews out there with Martsch, the leader of Built to Spill, the band we're talking about, are occasionally amusing because of their aw shucks golly gee quality to them. Take this excerpt, for example, from an interview Martsch did with the Seattle radio station KEXP in 2019, and this is from KEXP.com. And interviewer asks the questions, what do you find yourself exploring thematically in your work these days? And he says, right now, I'm not really even working too hard on writing songs. As far as themes go and lyrics, that's the very hardest thing for me to do and the last thing to come and the thing I spend the least amount of time doing. So I'll jot down some phrases or ideas and keep them in notebooks, but they're just not fun to look at. And they're never very impressive. But eventually I come up with something to put words on the songs. But thematically, I don't have any things I'm working on right now. Next question. Do you ever consider how your music has influenced so many young songwriters? Well, I guess I mostly will consider it when I'm doing an interview and somebody asks me about it. Otherwise, I don't. I guess here and there, I'll meet somebody and they'll say something. Of course, it's flattering, but also it's just kind of arbitrary, you know? I guess it depends on who it is. If I like their music, I'm flattered. If I don't, I'm sorry. And then the final question: does making music feel freeing? I think sometimes, but sometimes it's like you're completely unfree. You're completely trapped by it when you're playing it because you're just doing the exact thing you're supposed to. There is no freedom. But some parts of music, there's lots of freedom. When you're creating it, you can go anywhere. I just got done practicing. When you just go through the songs, there's a little bit of freedom, but you're pretty much stuck there. I remember playing on the radio one time doing this acoustic show, and I just hadn't practiced very much, and I was very nervous about it. I was live on the radio, and I felt so trapped. I'm here, you know. I have to do this. For once, I can't just get up from my guitar and go do something else. With the band, though, it's different. With the band, I'm pretty comfortable and confident about it. But with the solo stuff, I'm still really nervous about it. All of a sudden, it was like, whoa, I'm just totally stuck here. Well, luckily, Doug Martsch's music with Built to Spill
Yeah.
does most of the talking for him, and we're all better off for it, right, Arturo?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, yeah, I agree with you that he's one of the most talented rock musicians of the last 40, definitely 30, but yeah, possibly 40. You know, he's the virtuoso guitar maestro of American indie rock. Like they're like in the American indie rock vernacular from the 90s onward, you're hard pressed to find better guitar players. And you'll be hard pressed to find better songwriters. He's a much better songwriter than he gives
Yeah,
himself credit for,
yeah,
both
absolutely.
musically and lyrically. And lyrically, his lyrics are really good when he really wants to be.
Yeah,
And
his
he's
lyrics have
got,
have a kind of a hippy dippy profundity to them that
sure,
really puts them on a different level for sure.
yeah. All right. So briefly, let's go into Built to Spill's origin story before we start describing and telling you how great their albums are. Like with The Cure and Robert Smith and Nine Inch Nails and Trent Reznor, Built to Spill is an ever-changing, ever-revolving cast of characters with one central figure dictating all: guitarist, singer, and chief songwriter Doug Martsch. Born in and raised in Boise, Idaho, March's first venture into the world of rock was when, as a fresh-faced 19-year-old, he joined the band Tree People in 1988. They were based in Seattle, and they were a grunge-light indie rock band. Imagine the softer side of Husker Du and Sonic Youth mixed with the Replacements and the Pixies.
Hmm.
They never rose above indie record label status, releasing 2 EPs and 4 albums for several labels until they broke up in 1994. However, it was near the end of Tree People's run that March decided to form his own band that would be subservient to his creative vision alone. As guitarist and singer, he formed the original trio incarnation of Built to Spill with bassist Brett Netson and drummer Ralph Yautz in 1992. The band name allegedly came from an invented phrase he and his wife at the time, the sister of band drummer Yautz, played, called Exquisite Corpse. It's a French game, or rather comes from a French art tradition where people collectively add to a collection of words or images in sequence. March used his connections from his time with Tree People to land a small deal with CZ Records, a Seattle-based label at the time most known for the Deep Six compilation of 1986 that featured bands such as Soundgarden, The Melvins, Green River, and Malfunction, thereby introducing the world to the nascent grunge rock movement. Before we go into that debut Built to Spill album, tell us more about Doug Martsch's origins, Chris.
Yeah, interesting guy in the sense that he's got that unassuming normalness to him. That he was in Seattle for 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
and he decided to move back to Boise because
Yeah.
he'd rather be at home with his wife starting a family
Yeah.
rather than being in party and heroin central. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it just kind of shows you, apparently, in his words, and he's done interviews where he says the Boise scene is pretty thriving and there's a lot of great bands in Boise. Who knew? Turns out one of those bands in Boise is a band called Caustic Resin, and
Hmm.
that was a platform for Brett Netson, and you'll hear a lot more about Brett Netson as we go through these albums. He served as the original bassist, but he's a really incredible guitar player. And Caustic Resin was mostly a metal band that kind of morphed into a psychedelic uh, thunderfuck band as they went
Hmm.
along. And Netson developed this style of just loud, bombastic, wild, wacky acid rock soloing and just loud, very tremolo, heavy, stuff. And so it's just interesting that March and Netson had this friendship and partnership where Netson can come in and play bass, which we'll get into in a second here. But those are kind of the interesting things that March was a Boise boy, tried and true, and for what it's worth, Tree People was punkier. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I could see why he wanted to break away from them because BTS is a lot of things, but a punk band is not one of them. And
Yeah.
so to
Yeah.
treat people being punkier, and I know March was, I think, like primarily the singer for Tree People, wasn't he? Or he
No, he
was one of the
wasn't. He
vocalists.
he sang some songs, but he was the main guitarist in that band.
Yeah. And so, so you don't get a sense that Tree People would be a launching pad for Built to Spill. So very different band. So just interesting that was his origin story, that he tried Seattle and he was
Yeah.
in Seattle when things blew up.
Right.
But he never tried to, apparently they were friends with Tad. And so
Yeah.
the only interest they had in getting on Sub Pop was because Tad, God's balls, was on Sub Pop. That was their only interest in being on Sub Pop, but they never tried to be like a quote unquote Sub Pop band.
Man.
So that it's kind of interesting that they were there in the scene, but they never tried to make it big as a Seattle band, and March ended up retreading to Boise. So how about that?
There's got to be some sliding door moment or other strand of the parallel universe where Doug Martsch is in Seattle and bumps into Kurt Cobain and joins Nirvana, huh?
Yeah, yeah, man.
That'd
Yeah,
be
yeah.
something. That's a
That, that,
hell of a
that, that-
band. Cobain's songs and March's songs.
and Grohl's drumming. Yeah. Wow. I
Yeah.
can't even imagine. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So
All right.
that's exciting fantasy baseball right there for you
Yeah.
folks.
All right. Now let's get into the albums. The 1990s, BTS, Built to Spill in the 1990s. The first one is Ultimate Alternative Waivers from 1993. Early Built to Spill albums are rather lo-fi, low-budget affairs. This album in particular has a very static-like sound, especially with Doug Martsch's searing guitar solos. But despite that, you can hear the beginnings of something great starting to formulate. The quirky melodies, the twisting song structures, the wonky guitar solos more indebted to classic 1970s rock than anything punk or traditionally indie, the spacey jams that veer from sludgy to psychedelic. It's all here in unrefined form, but that refinement would come very, very soon, as in with the next album. Chris?
Yeah, yeah. This is definitely what you they had the noise down before the songs.
Yeah.
And the noise is here. Like I said, Brett Netzen is a bassist, very fuzzy bassist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fuzz and a lot of wacky fuzz, but he also mans some of the guitar too, and so he lends some of his bombast to some of these songs. But there are some moments on here. Three years ago today is a great song. Built to Spill. They have the song Built to Spill is actually quite good. And then probably my favorite song on the record is Hazy, which
Mm.
is, that's more closer to something that would be on the next record.
Yeah.
But yeah, then the rest of the record is really a mixed bag. It's like pieces and shards. And the greatest thing about it is that they have that goof on "Oh Sweet Nothing" by VU. What's it
Yeah.
called? No,
Yeah.
Nowhere, Nothing, Fuck
The
Up.
Velvet Underground. Oh, sweet nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the name of the song? Like Nothing, Nowhere, Fuck Up or something like that.
Yes, that one. Yes, that's exactly what it's called.
Yep, and so yeah, so I appreciate that. So you goofing on Lou Reed by stealing lyrics from "Oh Sweet Nothing" and then mixing them in with "Nothing, Nowhere, Fuck Up." So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the thing there, and again, Netzen, he becomes an important character in a couple of albums in terms of when we think of the classic Built to Spill. Netzen
Yeah.
is a huge part of that.
Right. And he's a big part of the next one, too. The next album, There's Nothing Wrong with Love from 1994. While this album did not sell millions of copies, it seemed to blow away millions of music critics. The rapturous reception in music media that they got for this album significantly raised the band's profile, eventually landing them a spot on the 1995 Lollapalooza tour. The hype also landed them a major deal with Warner Brothers, which would be Built to Spill's home for the next 20 years. As for the album itself, as I mentioned earlier, it's an exquisite refinement of the sound they established on their debut, but more than a refinement, it's a polishing. Why? Because Doug Martsch makes a quantum leap as a songwriter. Other BTS albums have many different factors that make them shine, but this one may very well be the one with the best songcraft, especially with March's lyrics taking on a peculiar stargazing, wistful feel, as throughout the album, he reflects on the depression he felt working a dismal job while trying to support a young family. Is it objectively their best album? Well, I don't know, but for me, this is the most emotionally powerful BTS record. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely huge, stunning leap in the songwriting between Ultimate
Yeah.
Alternative Waivers and this one. And for what it's worth, Brett Netzen's not on this record, but Brett
He's
Nelson
not.
is.
I always get those two confused.
Brett Nelson was the bassist for a long time, and this is his first appearance. Yeah, Netzen and Nelson. So yeah, Nelson. he serves as bassist on this and kind of takes over there. And then a guy named Andy Caps was the drummer on this record. So he, kind of for at least for a little while, he had a habit of switching up. It's weird. He in the beginning he had a habit of switching up the drummer and the bassist and the contributors, and then lately in the last decade, he's switched things up. But for a while there, for about 18 years, he had the same bassist and drummer. The bassist was Brett Nelson, so he shows up here. But anyway, this is one of the most dreamy indie rock albums imaginable. I mean, it just has a wide-eyed innocence and sweetness to it. And even in the proggier stuff, there's a real aw shucks, doughy-eyedness to the proceedings. That basically it's the young man looking up at the stars and wondering if there's something better that exists in the world other than the drudgery. And he's also delving in the nostalgia of how he grew up and wanting to get back to to that. And there's the great lyric from Carr, I want to see the movies of my dreams.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the album begins with this really great, like you said, just really moving streak and just emotionally resonant streak of the first five songs: In the Morning, Reasons, Big Dipper, Car, and Fling, all of which are great, all of which Fling is an acoustic ballad, but the others have a rockingness to it, and especially Big Dipper, which is my favorite of those songs. It just says that's what you call Brontosaurus boogie. It's almost dancey, and it's got this jittery rhythm to it that really drives it. And then the second half of the record, it gets proggier, and so you get your first hint of proggy built to spill with songs like Cleo and Israel's Son and Stab. Stab being my favorite song on the entire record. Stab is just astonishing. It's the 7 minute, what would you call it? Almost like kind of piratey, kind of almost like a psychedelic sea shanty. In some respects, and then it gets into into this rhythm and this extended outro that would make Rush proud. Yeah. So it really is kind of astonishing. And then, of course, then you have the other great song on the album, which is "Dystopian Dream Girl,"
Right.
which is just has this really great riff and really great rhythm to it, and it's really where, because for the most part, it's a rhythm guitar record. It's him riffing and him sort of adding color and spice to the rhythms with like weird wonks and winks and wanks. But he really lets loose as an Axeman on Dystopian Dream Girl. It's like the one song that's got really that kind of awesome soloing. That, and I guess Stab kind of gets into that too. So
Right.
there's that. You know who else was a big fan of this record, by the way?
Who?
Robert Christgau, our
Oh,
our our
really?
our favorite our favorite rock critic. Here's
Uh-huh.
what Bob Christgau had to say in his consumer guide. Quote, "Biz big boys of both sexes are besieging Doug Martsch, and why not? Guy's yoked his fully realized guitar style to material even more mature than that. How rare is it for a rock and roll dad to write songs about childhood that don't trade self-pitying adolescent sentimentality for self-congratulatory adult sentimentality? So you know what Doug Martsch tells the big boys? That he likes Idaho and his family too much to hit the rock and roll road. Here's hoping he can turn a modest profit while sticking to the essence of this decision, one of the sanest anti-star biases in all of indiedom. And here's hoping he keeps writing those songs and playing that guitar. A minus."
Ah, nice.
Yep.
Hey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I thought that was pretty good. That he prefers to be in Idaho and to sing about Idaho.
Right.
Even right down to a song called Twin Falls.
Right. Yeah, which is like the
Yeah.
nearest, and I think it's somewhere near around Boise, which is, I think he still lives there, doesn't he?
Yeah, he still lives in Boise. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He
Man,
uh he never moved out of there. He moved back and he stayed put. He's
Mm,
constantly on the road. I mean, basically,
right.
because nobody can make any money from releasing albums anymore. So
He does.
he tours constantly. I know he's got
Right.
like 50 dates coming up starting in July
Mm,
for the rest of the year. So there you go.
yeah. All right, the next one. Perfect from Now On from 1997. For their major label debut, Built to Spill pulled out all the stops to expand and stretch their sound out to cosmic levels. The songs are longer, more fluid, with plenty of truly psychedelic guitar work and sounds, loopy lyrics connecting the vastness of outer space to the existential angst of inner space, and structures that approach progressive rock. It's thick and soupy, but it also rocks with a never before heard heaviness and has some of the most gorgeous melodies Doug Martsch has ever constructed. This band had come a long way from the quirky indie garage band of just a few years earlier. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. The first half of this album is note perfect. It really is perfect from now on.
Hmm.
You're talking the first four songs, which are Randy describes it describes eternity. I would hurt a fly, uh, stop the show, and made up dreams.
Yeah.
Are all just perfect, and they all just jam out. And especially, I would hurt a fly, which just has this like just beautiful mixture of electric guitars that builds into this incredibly wacky outro that goes on for a couple of minutes, and it just really perfect. The second half again is a little bit more. It's not inconsistent. It's just not as songy.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of jamming and a lot of almost song suites or almost like song suites of movements.
Yeah.
The best of those overall is probably Untrustable.
Yeah.
I've never been a huge fan of the first. Basically, Untrustable is a three movement piece. I've
Hmm.
never been a huge fan of the first movement, which is basically the song. I mean,
Yeah.
what we would recognize as the song, but the next two movements are just beautiful, and it just this kind of this floating melody, and these just kind of weird keyboard notes that builds into this astonishing coda of just crashing, thundering riffs
Yeah.
and lead work that it just heads for the exits like big
Yeah.
time and just is like a tsunami to end the record. The real star of this record is Brett Netzen. We've mentioned Brett Netzen before. He served as the bassist on Ultimate Alternative Waivers. Here he comes in. Funny story with this, that the version of this record that they released was the third recording of it.
Wow.
They did a first recording, and March didn't like it. So they started over and they recorded it in Seattle. And apparently he did like that. But what happened was is Phil Eck went to go pick up, Phil Eck was the producer for a long time of Built to Spill. He was going to drive back to Boise to do post production and had the reels in the back of his truck. Well, I guess it was like 105 that day,
Jeez.
and the reels melted,
Ugh.
and so ruined that one. And it was on the third attempt that they brought in Brett Netzen, and he's like, "Hey, you want to play on this record?" It's like, yeah. And so basically, Netzen realized March's vision for the wackier stuff, the wilder stuff, like I would hurt a fly. He gets basically gets the fly part.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just this really soaring, beautiful, snaking solo in soloing in the background, just sort of lead work. And then he also gets the wackier stuff on Randy Describes Eternity and Stop the Show, which is just just really just sort of a million, almost like metal guitar playing. It's like
Yeah.
psychedelic metal guitar playing that Brett Netzen provides to this record, and just basically the stuff that's the most recognizable and the stuff the most outlandish guitar playing. This is something that March did his entire career. He worked with two great guitar players throughout the history of this band, Brett Netzen and another guy named Jim Roth, who we'll talk about soon. March, when he played with these guys live, gave himself the boring parts when they put together these three guitar assaults. He
Yeah.
gave himself the boring parts, which were to maintain the skeleton, the riff, and the main connective tissue, while the other two guys got to go nuts with their stuff. Netson with his way kind of wacky psychedelic metal stuff, and Jim Roth with a lot of slide guitar and a lot of really loud, like just searing, and just playing, strumming a mile a minute or a mile a second actually,
Yeah.
uh, and doing all of that. So there's that. And then the other thing about this record too is that March did these songs. So all these songs are like 6 minutes or longer.
Yeah.
That they're all these long, complicated songs with multiple movements. And he did that on purpose for kind of a weird reason. Let me quote from an interview that he did in 2022 with Tidal, which is a streaming service. He says, quote, "Everything I do is really just messing around and then seeing what comes out of it. But at the same time, what control I had, I put towards. There's really a lot of Beatles influence on that record. I was listening to that kind of stuff. I was also consciously trying to keep Warner Brothers from having a song they could shove down people's throats, which was a fear of mine at the time, that they would try to latch on to something. At that time in my life, the idea of a record company or radio stations or anyone playing a song, a bunch until people hate it or give into it, that just really annoyed me. The album was a reaction to that feeling. So I wanted to make the songs long, and part of them making them long was I felt there's a certain weight that that came with a long song that has a certain power, a song that goes from here to there and changes up and does all these weird things that can surprise you in different ways. I was going for that. So
If you don't want to hit, then if you don't want to hit, then why sign on to a major label?
hey, distribution, budget, and creative license. They gave him the freedom to do what he wanted, but with budget and with wide distribution. So not a bad deal. So apparently they were okay with him saying fuck the radio because he stayed on the label for 20 more years.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Oh well, the next album though is more of a radio friendly record, believe it or
Way
not.
more.
Yeah, Keep It Like a Secret from 1999. This is the record that is generally regarded as their greatest work. It's hard to argue when you get through listening to it, even after just one setting. Basically, they took the expanded psychedelia and newfound heaviness of the previous record, condensed it, and infused it with more melodic hooks than ever before. The result is what amounts to a beefed up, shiny arena rock version of Built to Spill, justifying their major label status. When Chris and I were both exposed to Built to Spill in 2000 when we were roommates in New York, this is the album that planted the seeds of the parallel universe segment for this podcast. At the time, we thought, wouldn't it be great if rock radio or K-Rock played this instead of Limp Bizkit or Creed or even Korn? Chris?
Yep. Absolutely. It was kind of funny. It was the only time in our friendship, or especially when we roomed together, that we were getting into the same exact albums at the exact same time. It was this album and There's Nothing Wrong with Love and Perfect from Now On, but especially this record that it was almost like a bonding experience because he would be blasting it in his room and I'd be blasting it in my room, and just sort of. Kind of communal. This is, as an adult, this is my favorite record. I can't say it's my favorite record of all time. That would be the Beatles 67-70 compilation. Basically the Blue Album from 1973, because I listened to that so much as a kid, I practically wore out the tape. But since age 24, this has been it. I've listened to this album literally hundreds of times. It's just an incredible accomplishment. The idea of taking prog rock structures and time signatures and ideas and condensing them into 4 and 5 minute long radio rock songs with strong hooks is just amazing. So it's this idea of let's take the proggy stuff, let's take the jammy stuff and all that, and let's make real songs out of it, because it might be the most complex rock record to ever be instantly accessible. That's for sure. You take a song like Sidewalk, which has this really weird, really time signature riff, or you get a song like "You Were Right," which is basically a waltz. It's like the simplest song on the record was like probably the most well-known song from it, called "You Were Right," which is just this sort of really extraordinarily simple but powerful and profound concept of basically March having a dialogue with his classic rock radio dial, where
Yeah.
he takes the titles of a bunch of or main lyrics from a bunch of classic rock songs, and he says, you were right, you were wrong when you said everything's gonna be all right. And then he said you were right when you said running against the wind. You were right when you said manic depression's a frustrating mess. You were right when you said this is the end.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it's like a great encapsulation, a very dopey but genius way of being depressed
Yeah.
by connecting everything to classic rock radio. So it's a dialectic with AM radio. And yeah, a few other things on here. There's, to me, the second half of the record is just perfect. You have Time Trap, which is the closest they ever got to Neil Young and Crazy Horse,
Mm.
with this opening bass riff that then it extends into this awesomely jammed out intro to the song, which then becomes like kind of a reggae song.
Yeah.
But it's that intro that where they really touch on Neil Young. Then you have the song "Else," which Modest Mouse pretty much copped for their song "Float On."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Built to Spill was a clear influence on Modest Mouse, or at least on Isaac Brock, in the way that
Mm.
he played guitar. Pretty clear influence, a pretty clear line, direct line to that. And then "Else" is followed by "You Were Right," and then "You Were Right" is followed by "Temporarily Blind," which is just this awesomely groovy, uh, awesome song that's got this towering lead part to it. Brett Netson does not play on Keep It Like a Secret, and so March, you know, March in interviews for years has downplayed his talent when compared to Jim Roth and Brett Netson, saying these guys are two of the best and most amazing guitar players ever, and I'm so much worse than they are. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Because basically he does like what Brett Netson shtick as well, or basically better than Netson. Like "You Were Right" and "Temporarily Blind" are songs that, and "Broken Chairs," which is the final song, which is like a jam out that goes on for like 9 minutes. Uh, on live, Netson would pick those up, but here March does it, and he does it just brilliantly. So yeah, so this album is just magnifique. The most popular song from the album over the years has been "Carry the Zero," which is
Mm.
just kind of this almost like a power ballad, which is the third song on the record. And I remember about a decade ago, it became popular on college rock radio. There was a fan base for that song that kind of extended the generations. So good stuff. And worth mentioning, this is the first time that they collaborated with Sam Coombs of the band Quasi. He plays
Mm.
keyboards on Broken Chairs and would make appearances as either a keyboardist or producer on subsequent Built to Spill records. So great. And Jim Roth makes his first appearance. Like he shows up as a second guitarist on songs like "The Plan" and in a few other spots on this record as well.
All right, next, the live album, simply titled Live, released in 2000 but recorded in 1999. This new arena rock version of Built to Spill took it to the road throughout the year of 1999, and the live album that documents this tour captures the band in all their glory. The heaviness that they exhibited on their previous two studio albums is absolutely punishing on this live album, and the guitar work is even more cosmically inclined. The band's formal influences, Neil Young and Crazy Horse, Jane's Addiction, Pavement, even the Smiths, are really brought to the forefront. Simply put, one of the most underrated live albums of all time. Chris?
Yeah, definitely one of the most underrated live albums of all time, and just features some incredible soloing from March, but also some incredible three guitar tapestries
Yeah.
from Martsch, Jim Roth, and Brett Netzen on here, and it gets wild. And a name that we haven't mentioned yet, by the way, that was definitely an influence on March and on Built to Spill, Jay Mascis and Dinosaur Jr.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities in their playing, and I think there's a lot of influence that March gathered from Mascis. But anyway, the guitar solo on the recording of "The Plan." "The Plan" is the lead single song from "Keep It Like a Secret." It's also the lead song on this record. The solo on that is my favorite ever, and is simply one of the best solos ever recorded. It's just absolutely incredible performance by March, really remarkable. And then, hey, say hello to Jim Roth, who is just about as good as March. And so, he runs counter. His playing on "The Plan" before then, he plays like a kind of a wild pedal affected slide part on there. He also is the rhythm guy during the solo, and he actually kind of stands out. And in some ways, kind of reminds me of Danny Whitten, who was Neil Young's guitarist in the earliest iteration of Crazy Horse. And then you get these three guitar tapestries, real assaults on "Stop the Show" and "Broken Chairs," especially on "Broken Chairs," where it goes on for like 6 minutes with
Yeah.
this crazy three guitar outro thing where it's just the three of them, and they just build this thing of just like let's just put it this way: this album green tests very well for all you pot smokers out there. This album green tests extremely well. Like that 4 minutes that they do that weaving in and out thing at the end of "Broken Chairs" feels like it goes on for 40 when you're stoned.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No shit.
yeah, for real. And worth noting that they took this recordings were from three shows, one in New York at Irving Plaza, where Art and I saw this band twice in Irving Plaza in subsequent years. One show in Denver, and then one show in Seattle. And naturally, everybody likes to compare Built to Spill to Neil Young and Crazy Horse, and so maybe it's a meta thing that they decided to cover Cortez the Killer.
A 20-minute version.
Yeah, a 20-minute version of Cortez the Killer, which is actually really faithful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, with the exception of the end. The end piece is a little bit of a freak out, but before that, it's incredibly faithful to how Neil might play it.
On this episode, we basked in the glory of the music of Built to Spill. For the next episode, we're going back to the City of Angels. Several episodes ago, we did a two-part series about rock music in Los Angeles in the 1980s. It's now time to move the timeline to the 1990s. And boy, oh boy, did LA give us a treasure trove of amazing rock music during this time. The last album by the massively influential Jane's Addiction, the greatest albums by iconic alt-rock funketeers the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the pioneering rap metal of Rage Against the Machine, the prog metal majesty of Tool, from nearby Palm Desert, the psychedelic stoner metal of Kyuss, from nearby Bakersfield, the nu metal of Korn, the Middle Eastern tinged psycho metal of System of a Down, the genre hopping wizardry of Beck, the pumped up geek rock of Weezer. LA had it all in the 1990s, and very few cities in the world at the time could match it for its depth and variety. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you Los Angeles Rocks in the 1990s, Part 1. Next, we've got Ancient Melodies of the Future from 2001. Doug Martsch took the Built to Spill sound as far as he could take it at the dawn of the new century. So for this album, it isn't surprising that he brought things back to earth a little bit on this record. The songs are more mid-tempo, not as long or bombastically epic, with more ballads and more of an emphasis on keyboards. Normally, I would classify this as a band being wussies and wimping out, but not here. It helps when there are beautiful, lush, spacey pacey ballads like Alarmed and You Are. With The Weather, the song a track called The Weather, March wrote what is essentially his most gorgeous pop ballad. This is probably Built to Spill's prettiest record. Chris?
Yeah, it's certainly one of their prettiest records. Yeah, they did an album a little later than this that is actually pretty as well. But yeah, here they go mid-tempo, and there's a lot of good stuff on here. It's an eclectic record that, you've got the album opener Strange, which is one
Yeah.
of the more rocking songs on it, and it's just a straightforward pop rock song. But it's got this really strange keyboard part on it from Sam Coombs that makes it kind of eerie.
Yeah.
And same thing, he shows up again on both Coombs shows up on both Alarmed, which is just this really pretty song, and then the album closer, The Weather, which again is pretty. But the best song on the album is probably the most bombastic, which is kind of ironic, which is Trimmed and Burning,
Yeah.
which is just a real rocker, and that features Brett Netzen and just kind of kind of going all out. And so they're subdued in some parts and they're bombastic in others. And so it's an up and down record. It's a little bit of an experience. It's as far as I know, it's their shortest record too. It's only like 39 minutes long.
Yeah.
And so they do a lot of that. So there's more texture to this record than in some of the others because of the keyboards and because they slow it down in some spots. And yeah, it was basically, I think like March. At this point, there's a little bit of burnout setting in, and they went on hiatus after this record. They did some touring, but then they did a hiatus, and so I think that March is kind of straining for to be creative here, and so he's giving it what he has, and so I think that that's probably why there's more of a melancholy or more of a mid tempo, because again he had kind of blown his load with the three albums
Mm.
before this.
Yeah. So for
Yeah.
sure, yeah. I mean, those are all three of them classic records. Next, You in Reverse from 2006. After a 5-year hiatus, Built to Spill returned with a vengeance. Opening track, Going Against Your Mind, starts off with a galloping groove and one of Doug Martsch's best ever guitar riffs, segueing into a slow, trippy middle section that seems to sizzle out before ramping it up for a rampaging, balls to the wall third section. It's one of the best tracks in the band's entire catalog. Liar is another slice of beautifully loopy, mid-tempo jangle pop, the kind of which March had become an expert at by this time. Mess with Time starts off as stomping hard rock, showing off a much underrated Led Zeppelin influence before transforming into a jam heavily influenced by Turkish music. Overall, it's a terrific return to form. Chris?
Yeah, I love this album. And Going Against Your Mind is my favorite BTS song. It's probably the best song they ever did. You know who agrees with me? Albert Hammond Jr. of The Strokes,
Yeah, yeah.
who in an interview with Rolling Stone that was published in November of 2006, they were in the middle of promoting First Impressions of Earth, which is an album I love and Arturo doesn't. But Albert Hammond Jr. said he gave it up to Built to Spill being one of his favorite bands, and he actually copped to aping March on at least one song on Impressions of Earth. But he said that Going Against Your Mind was like his favorite song of that period, and that intro, that those first 2 minutes and 5 seconds, that intro piece of Going Against Your Mind, the opening drum piece, that riff, and then Brett Netzen's, sort of bombastic, sort of again psychedelic metal work, which is just really just beautiful, and they just combine it, and then it gets kind of like groovy, and then it goes into the main song, which great verse, chorus, verse, and you just a lot of energy going on there, and then you get into the middle period, or this little bridge where he's talking about going into the light and one night and looking up and thought it was an alien, turned out to be just God. Is probably my favorite lyric of all of BTS and of all of Doug Martsch's loopy lyrics. That's probably my favorite. But this song, this album really starts off really strong. You have that followed by Traces, which is just this real stomper of almost like a throwback to like late '80s college rock, and then Liar, which you mentioned, which is just a really pretty ballad, and also a throwback to '80s college rock. And there's just a lot of great stuff. The album ends extraordinarily well too. The 1-2 punch at the end of Just a Habit and The Weight,
Sure.
which are kind of slower, more ballady type songs, but that have a lot of psychedelic sheen to them. Like Just a
Mm,
Habit
yeah.
is this really pretty, almost ballad type of thing that gets probably one of Netson's greatest performances on any BTS record with the riff that he puts on top of it. It's just like this huge soaring lead like solo on this like really pretty acoustic ballad. It's really kind of a striking juxtaposition. And then The Weight is just kind of it's kind of a dopey song, but it gets stretched and slowed and just kind of extended out, and it builds, and so it becomes hypnotic by the end of it. And again, so with this Just the Habit and The Weight, it was the most psychedelic streak on a BTS record since Perfect from Now On.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I can't say enough good things about this record. It's not quite there with Keep It Like a Secret and Perfect from Now On, and There's Nothing
Not
Wrong with
many
Love.
albums are.
Yeah, but this one's definitely 4.5 stars,
Yeah,
for
sure.
sure. Yeah, I love it, and one of the highlight of prepping for this episode was getting back in touch with you in reverse.
Definitely. All right. The next one, just a few years later, There Is No Enemy from 2009. You were never a big fan of this album when it came out, Chris, but I think it's really good. The highest charting of Built to Spill albums and the highest charting they ever achieved on the Billboard albums chart, hitting number 50. It shows Doug Martsch engaging in epic space disco with good old boredom. Nowhere Lullaby is another patented lush ballad with one of the most winding, beautiful melodies March ever came up with. There's a psychedelic gauze enveloping this whole record that gives it a warmth and an embracing richness. Chris?
Yeah, and in listening to it again with fresh ears, at the time it was kind of a letdown from you in reverse because it was so subdued.
Yeah.
It's definitely their most subdued record, and it was kind of ironic because it was the first album. Brett Netz and Jim Roth both became official members of the band. Jim
Mm,
Roth officially joined with Universe, and then Netson joined officially for this record. There's No Enemy, and so now you've got the three-headed monster
yeah.
all there officially. And, they're not touring members; they're real members. And what do? They come out with their most subdued record. So kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But yeah, some really pretty stuff on here. Hindsight is a really cool. Was the single. That's a really cool song. Nowhere Lullaby. Life's a Dream, which is the best song on the record and has the
Mm.
best solo on the record from March, actually plays that one. And then Things Fall Apart is another great song on it as well. And I would say that it's aged really well. And
I agree.
of the albums that Phil Eck produced the albums between There's Nothing Wrong with Love and Ancient Melodies of the Future, and then he peeled off, then it was co-produced with a guy named Stephen Lobdell, You in Reverse, and then this one was co-produced with another guy. But this is the best of the post Phil Eck productions. Like you said, I like how you put that, a psychedelic gauze.
Yeah.
There is a warmth to this record, and there's a real lushness to it, and it's a pretty album. There's a lot of pretty stuff on here, and there's some stuff that rocks too. I like the song "Oh Yeah" as well.
It's a good
Yeah,
one too. Yeah.
yeah, it's a pretty kick-ass song. And then, like I said, Hindsight actually got on the radio. That my
Did
local
it
station
really?
in White Plains, New York, where I was living there, WPXK, The Peak. They played Hindsight quite a bit the first month it was out. So yeah, so they actually had a radio song that got
Hmm.
radio play.
Wow. Jeez.
Imagine that.
Because they rarely got radio play, this band, only on like some
Yeah,
obscure college radio stations, and that's
yeah.
it. That's all.
But this one got some mainstream play.
All right. Next, Untethered Moon from 2015. Built to Spill were never a band that sold tons of records, even in the times of physical media. In the 2010s, digital streaming became the main method of music consumption. Unfortunately, its model is one that rewards the more mainstream superstar pop artists more than ever before, squeezing out the ability for non-mainstream slash underground acts to make more money from their music than ever before. That's a topic for another conversation or even a podcast. Therefore, it isn't surprising that Doug Martsch decided to make Built to Spill primarily a touring act rather than a recording one. After all, with 7 studio albums, there's more than enough material to play to a decent sized loyal fan base. That being said, the 8th BTS studio album and final one for Warner Brothers seems to reflect March's disaffection with the music industry. It sounds like a record made to fulfill a record label contract, as it sounds completely uninspired, with every track being a rehash or a recycling of the classic Built to Spill song sound, with no interesting or engaging songs to hold them up. This is one you can skip. Chris?
Untethered shit. Yeah, it's not a very good album. It's by far the worst BTS record. March was clearly in a slump as a songwriter. Actually, it got so bad that they did a first effort. It took 6 years between There Is No Enemy and Untethered Moon. They tried to do a first album in 2012,
Mm,
and it was so unsatisfying that March was in such a slump and struggling so bad that the rhythm section quit on him.
jeez.
That's when he lost Brett Nelson and drummer Scott Plouffe. We forgot to
Yeah.
mention Scott Plouffe by name. Very good drummer, but they quit the band and they were replaced by a couple of guys who were in the Fine and Albertini. Uh,
Mm.
they were actually part of the road crew for years for the band, and then they stepped in and became the drummer and bassist for this record. And actually, March did all the guitars himself. Roth and Netson are back out of the picture. They were touring still, but they weren't
Yeah.
on this record. So March is back to doing it all himself. But it doesn't matter. You know, with the exception of Living Zoo is the only interesting thing on this record because it's got this cool solo on it and this kind of interesting melodic idea. It's not a great song, but at least it has some ideas that are engaging. The rest of it is just crap, and there's not a memorable melody. There's not any real hooks, and it plods. And yeah, like you said, maybe because this was the last album they ever did for Warner Brothers, so maybe they were just saying over and out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
It sounded like it.
and phoned it in. And so yeah, really, really, really disappointing. So untethered shit. And it's like you said, if you can skip any record, it's this one.
Yeah, for sure. And then finally, When the Wind Forgets Your Name from 2022, 7 years later, Doug Martsch decided that studio albums are worth it after all. Released on legendary Seattle indie label Sub Pop, this album contains some of the tightest and catchiest songs Martsch had written in over a decade. Stylistically, he even expands into other genres, touching on Brazilian samba pop and reggae. The record tails off and runs out of gas a little bit toward the end, but it's a nifty little return to form. Chris?
Yeah, definitely a nifty return to form. I like this record a lot. This is one of my favorite albums of the 2020s, actually. And my favorite BTS album since You in Reverse, and at least as good as There Is No Enemy, and maybe even a little bit better. There's just a bunch of great songs on here. Fool's Gold, Understood, Elements, which is like a real psychedelic, real psychedelic nugget. You've got Rocksteady, which is a reggae song, and then Spiderweb, which just has really awesome lead work from March. Now, being back to a one guitar band, March takes it upon himself to experiment with keyboards on this record. And so him playing keyboards, it's as strange as you would think it would be. And like on Elements, there's this organ solo on Rocksteady. There's this really weird. I don't even know what it is. It's like this loop, this almost like a ballpark stadium loop that makes things just really strange. And so he's doing that. And the thing to note about this record is that the rhythm section he works with is really great. There are these
Yeah.
two guys from a Brazilian band called Arugia, and
Mm,
I've covered one of their albums on our Parallel Universe in the past, and I'm actually planning on doing another one of their albums for the
mm,
Parallel Vault on our next
mm.
episode. But Lay Almeida is on drums, and a guy named João Casillas is on bass. And Lay Almeida, by far the best drummer that he's ever had. He's also a percussionist, so there's like all kinds of weird chimes and stuff on this record too. And they're also experienced producers, and so this is kind of a self-produced record between the three of them. They managed to record basic tracks while March was touring Brazil in late 2019, but then they couldn't get back together because of COVID, and so they did a lot of tape trading and a lot
Right.
of back and forth and a lot of overdubbing and a lot of production tweaks and a lot of that's one of the reasons why the album sounds it's the indiest sounding record they probably did since There's Nothing Wrong with Love. But
Jeez.
no
Yeah.
coincidence since they're back on Sub Pop.
Right. Well, this
So
is their first album on Sub Pop, not back on Sub Pop.
yeah, well, back in the Indies
Back in the Indies,
is
right?
what I meant to say. They're back in
Yeah.
the Indies, and so it's their most indie sounding record since There's Nothing Wrong with Love, which was their last indie record. So that's what I meant to say. But the other thing about this record too is that March was not in a great headspace when he
Mm,
wrote this. He a lot of times, his earlier records, like especially There's Nothing Wrong with Love, there's like this doughy-eyed optimism and there's this young man's optimism. And
yeah.
even on Keep It Like a Secret, which is like a lot of love songs
Right.
on there, he seems to be optimistic and hopeful. Here he's not. By far his most pessimistic record.
Yeah, there's a lot of cynicism in the lyrics. He's really
Yeah,
angry.
let me quote a
Jesus,
few of these
Doug.
lyrics from the song Gonna Lose. I've come to realize time's all wrong. Answers materialize, then they're gone. They were here, but the ones like that disappear and they don't come back. And then from the song Elements, you feel the breeze at your back. It makes you feel so bold. But when the wind forgets your name, the world can be so cold. That's like some real high school shit right there. And then from the last song of the album, which is actually a really great rollicking album closer, Comes a Day, he sings, and you'll never know because you'll never know what's real. We're all paralyzed with life. And when you realize you can realize what's real, isn't there something we can bide besides our time? Yeesh. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
What a bum tripper.
he's very wordy there. I like the wordplay.
Yeah, you can realize when you realize you can realize.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I guess the pot that Doug was smoking during this record, because remember they basically did it in isolation. It took two years to complete the record because he
Yeah.
had no motivation because he was locked down and depressed
Yeah.
because of COVID, and so he must have been smoking some pretty good dope.
Well,
When
those dudes from Brazil brought some good stuff with them, maybe.
Yeah, maybe or at least introduced him to some stuff when they were actually together in 2019.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, so yeah, big comeback record for him. And again, my favorite album of theirs in 16 years. So that's the end of the road. And right now, as kind of an outro, he's touring with two young women in his band, bassist Melanie Radford, who's by far the best bassist he's ever had, by the way,
Mm,
in his
mm,
band. She is great. She's a great
yeah.
performer. She's fun to watch, but she can play her butt off. And then you've got Teresa Esquera is the
Mhm.
drummer, young Latina lady, and she can slap the skins real hard. And so he's got a good young backing band now. I'll be curious to see if they ever get into the studio and to see what they would sound like on a record. So who knows what's going to happen from here? So what would you say, if you had to make a legacy statement, like an overarching legacy statement about BTS, what would you say about them, Arturo?
They were the American indie rock band that made it cool to like classic rock again. You know,
Yeah.
especially when you consider all of Doug Martsch's influences. They're pretty. Most of them are pre 1980s.
Yep.
And he's got to. I mean, he loves his Pavement. He loves his Smiths.
He loves
It's
his Jane's
there.
Addiction.
Is Jane's Addiction is a very underrated influence on Doug Martsch, I think. But he made indie rock okay to like long guitar solos and really complex song structures. I mean, Jay Mascis of Dinosaur Jr. did long guitar solos, but his songs are pretty simple. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of Doug March's Built to Spill stuff isn't that simple, but it's not
Nope.
so complex that it alienates the listener
No,
because he
it's not
still
Gentle Giant.
yeah, he manages to pack his songs with beautiful melodies and great hooks and these great bridges and these
Yeah.
wonderful passages that are catchy and appealing and lovely,
Yeah. So
really.
don't worry, folks. It's not The Lamb Lies on Broadway.
Yeah. So I think that's to me what Built to Spill's legacy really is. It's 90s American indie rock that made it cool to like old classic rock, So
There you go. There you go. And with that, folks, as we always do at the end of these episodes, we encourage you to join our fabulous Facebook curmudgeonly community. Lots of mirth. Art came up with some real fun nuggets of built to spill goodness up there this week, and we had some good participation as we always do this week. So you can join there at facebook.com/group/curmudgeonrock. We're invite only, but unless you're banned from being within 500 feet of a school, chances are we'll let you in. If you have any thoughts about Built to Spill, if you're as excited about them as we are in this Parallel Universe All-Stars event, or if you think they suck, we'd love to hear from you. Send us some fan mail, curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. And as we've been doing for the last year and a half, we'll be putting together a Spotify playlist with lots of this BTS. I may just put all of these albums just in there and just have like one big sprawling playlist that has the whole catalog in there for everyone. And you'll be able to access the link to that playlist in our episode description, which you'll be able to see wherever you access your podcast, whether that's Apple or Stitcher or Amazon or Samsung or wherever else you get your podcasts, folks. So with that, we bid you farewell, and we'll talk to everybody in 2 weeks.